Little do they know.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Welcome everybody to tonight's Cabinet meeting of the Cabinet. It is a one-issue item to discuss today, which is the Black Country Plan, approval of the draft plan for consultation. So I'll go through the agenda quite rapidly. So number one, any apologies for absence?
Councillor Clark and Councillor Taylor and Catherine Driscoll.
Okay, thank you. And number two, to receive any declarations of interest under the Members' Code of Conduct. Councillor Zada.
Thank you, Leader. It's important that the meeting knows, and I shall continue to declare it at every opportunity, that I have a number of property investments both in this borough and neighbouring boroughs, and this may or may not impact on my investments in those boroughs. So I want to be open and transparent that the Council is aware of my property portfolio.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Baton and then Councillor Khurshid Ahmed.
Thank you, but I'm not sure whether I do need to declare it, because I do think the is most affected by this country plan, so just to be completely transparent, that's my place of residence.
Okay, thank you, Cathy. Khurshid.
Thank you. Similar interests as Councillor Zada and Councillor Baton.
Okay, thank you. Any other declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. Okay, right then on to the main item of tonight, the Black Country Plan, the approval of draft plan for consultation. Before I hand over to Helen Martin to present this report, the way I want to play this tonight is that I want to give everybody the opportunity to comment, ask questions fully, so we're absolutely transparent. If those questions be directed at the Cabinet member, and then when we've sort of exhausted all questions and comments, I'll sum up, and then we'll, as a Cabinet, look at the recommendations. So, Helen, off you go.
Thank you, Leader. This report seeks approval of the draft Black Country Plan for consultation for an 8-week period starting in this summer. This presentation is longer and more detailed than we would normally provide for Cabinet, but as you will appreciate from the papers and the draft plan, that this is a critical stage of this process in what is a hugely complex and important document for the future of the borough. By way of background, you will recall that the Black Country Core Strategy was adopted in 2011 by all 4 Black Country authorities and covered the period up to 2026. The plan then contained a commitment to review after 5 years post-adoption, and that review commenced in 2017. So the draft Black Country Plan, which is in Appendix 1 of your papers, is written as a complete plan with a full set of policies and a full set of proposals. The plan identifies where new employment and housing development will be located and where investment for new infrastructure such as transport, schools and health facilities will be made. It includes policies that will guide future development and includes a draft policies map which will form part of the draft plan and is in your Appendix 1. The overarching spatial strategy seeks to deliver growth through sustainable patterns of development by a number of methods, including delivering the majority of the development within the existing urban area, focusing growth and regeneration into growth network of strategic centres such as Brierley Hill, and core regeneration areas, which for Dudley there are 3, Stourbridge, Lye and Kings Wymford and Pensnet. It seeks to protect and enhance the quality of existing town and neighbourhood areas outside of those strategic centres and core regeneration areas, and will deliver a limited number of neighbourhood growth areas in highly sustainable locations on the edge of urban areas. Protecting the openness of the Black Country Greenbelt by resisting inappropriate development, and protecting the Black Country's character and environmental assets, including heritage, natural and open spaces. And of course, minimising and mitigating the likely effects of climate change. In terms of our development needs, the housing need is now determined by the standard method which is set by government. This generates a total need of 76,076 new homes across the Black Country up to 2039. This increases the number of homes that are currently built across the Black Country from 2,600 per year to 4,000 per year. We also need around 565 hectares of employment land in order to provide enough jobs to accommodate the growth needs of our existing and our future businesses. And this evidence has been derived from an economic development needs assessment, and that has been updated to reflect the economic impact of the pandemic. The draft plan seeks to deliver the majority of development in existing urban areas, making use of brownfield or previously developed land, vacant properties and surplus industrial land as much as is possible, with some greenfield sites or surplus open spaces. Each local authority has reviewed its urban supply, it has looked to increase densities on housing sites, including our town centres, as well as increasing the capacity within the strategic centres, and has identified new sites to be allocated in the plan. The review has demonstrated enough land in the urban area to build around 40,170 new homes and to provide 306 hectares of employment land. Despite this review, there is a significant shortfall in housing land supply of 35,959 homes and 352 hectares of employment land. Given the scale of housing and employment land required, a significant gap between the need and supply remains, and therefore there is a need for a Greenbelt review with exceptional circumstances having been triggered in line with the government planning policy. This work has led to the identification of a limited number of what we're terming neighbourhood growth areas, where it is proposed to remove land from the Greenbelt in highly sustainable locations on the urban fringe. There will also be a number of small sites released from the Greenbelt in other sustainable locations, on which I'll provide more detail in a moment. But what that means for Dudley, but in terms of the Black Country, these sites provide in total 7,720 homes and 47 hectares of employment land. The majority of land proposed to be released from the Greenbelt is located in Walsall, which has by far the largest area of Greenbelt of all 4 authorities. Greenbelt land proposed to be allocated for housing is in Dudley, 1,117 homes, or 3% of our Greenbelt. For Sandwell, 171 homes, or below 1%. For Walsall, it's 5,418, or 8%. And for Wolverhampton, 1,114, or 5%. This is a total of 7,720 homes, and in Walsall, they will also seek to release an additional number of homes estimated to be delivered after the current plan period. And Walsall will also be releasing 47 hectares of land in the Greenbelt to meet employment needs. Overall, for the Black Country as a whole, this is a 6% release of Greenbelt that's being proposed. Where sites are ultimately removed from the Greenbelt, developers will be required to pay for improvements to the environmental quality and accessibility of the remaining Greenbelt land which is nearby. The sources of land supply identified in the draft plan, urban and Greenbelt, will deliver 47,837 homes or 354 hectares of employment land. It's about 63% of overall need of housing. However, there will still be a shortfall, and this is 28,241 homes or 211 hectares of employment land up to the end of the plan period of 2039. The government requires neighbouring local authorities to work together under what's termed the duty to cooperate to meet that housing and employment land need when producing their local plans. The Black Country authorities have asked our neighbouring authorities, such as South Staffordshire, Lichfield, Cannock Chase, Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin, to provide additional housing and employment land in their areas to meet the needs of the Black Country. Currently, there have been offers from neighbouring authorities of between 8,000 and 9,500 homes and a minimum of 102 hectares of employment land, which will be tested through their own local plan reviews. Even after all of this, there is a shortfall of 18,739 or 20,239 homes, depending on the offer, and a shortfall of 211 hectares of employment land that will have to continue to be pursued through the duty to cooperate. In addition to land allocations, the draft plan has updated or included new policies, and these have been carried out in line with a number of changes at national planning policy and guidance since the adoption of the original plan. There are new policies on climate change, sustainable construction, trees, biodiversity net gain, and the mitigation for the loss of Greenbelt. Inside space, water efficiency and accessibility standards of new housing have been set to improve the build quality to meet the needs of our residents, and contributions will be sought for improvements to education and health services where viable. For the purposes of housing, the viability and delivery study divided the Black Country into low, medium and high housing value areas. Taking into account existing and new policy requirements, that study concluded that the maximum of 10% affordable housing will be viable in the low value areas, rising to 20% in medium value and 30% in high value areas. Cabinet should note that the housing market zone map in the draft document will be updated prior to consultation to reflect these housing zones. So, what does this mean for Dudley? The draft plan proposals for Dudley will provide enough land to build 13,235 new homes and provide 22 hectares of employment land up to the end of the plan period. This will include 12,118 homes in the urban area on new sites and sites that have been carried forward from our existing plan and existing housing land supply. In addition, we're seeking to provide 1,117 homes on land that we're proposing to release from the Greenbelt. This is equivalent to 53.8 hectares of land, or 3% of our Greenbelt area. This consultation proposes new neighbourhood growth areas in Kings Wynford, where 2 sites, land to the south of Holbeach Lane, Wolverhampton Road, and land at Swindon Road and Wallheath, could be released from the Greenbelt, providing a total of 860 homes. There are a number of smaller sites on the edge of urban areas we are also proposing, namely land at Worcester Road, Stourbridge, and grazing land at Wollaston Farm, plus 1 site at Sedgley off Viewfield Crescent, and 1 site in Lower Gornal on Lower Guys Lane. These locations could provide 250 homes or more on the edge of an urban area where there are existing transport routes and high levels of access to local services. In some cases, new services may need to be provided as part of this new development. And master plans will be prepared for these sites, which will set out high-quality design guidelines, infrastructure requirements, including improved accessibility for walking, cycling and public transport, and any necessary highway improvements. Dudley is also proposing to allocate an area of local green space at Corbett Meadow in Stourbridge. Local green space will be protected from inappropriate development unless there are very special circumstances outweighing the harm. In terms of infrastructure provision, wherever growth is proposed, consideration needs to be given to the local infrastructure needs. Officers have engaged with colleagues in education, utilities, healthcare and transport, and evidence so far is indicating there are no major infrastructure showstoppers that would prevent the deliverability of the sites that have been proposed. Infrastructure provisions such as open space, schools and health provision have been factored into new policies and planning obligations. However, in the case of some of the larger sites, it may be necessary that infrastructure provision, such as schools, is delivered on site. The transportation modelling work being undertaken to support the plan will identify locations that require additional transport interventions to support that development above and over that already identified. Once the locations are identified, the type and scale of those interventions required and the mechanisms for delivery will be incorporated into the submission version of this plan and into the review of the local transport plan. So it is proposed to undertake a public consultation on this draft plan for an 8-week period, commencing in August 21 and running till early October, and it will follow the latest guidance for the COVID pandemic. That consultation will allow stakeholders and local residents the opportunity to comment on all of the details of the plan in advance of the formal publication stage, when consultation responses will be invited only on the legality and the soundness of the plan. Following the draft consultation and the completion of all the outstanding evidence, the amended version of the draft plan will form a publication plan, which will go out to consultation next summer, summer 22, and will be subject again to Cabinet approval. So just to reiterate, what we're asking Cabinet tonight is not to approve the plans and the policies, not to approve the allocations, but we're seeking approval for 6 recommendations, which are at section 2 of your report. So approval to go out to consult on this plan, approval for the proposed consultation material, and to agree that the matter be considered at the future Council Scrutiny Committee. We're also seeking delegation authority for myself in consultation with Councillor Phipps as the relevant Cabinet member to make any non-substantive changes following that consultation, and to also agree the final accompanying documents and the final dates for that 8-week consultation. Thank you.
When you took for questions and comments?
I think just briefly, because I'm sure we'll get through quite a lot of the material in the plan with regards to questions and comments from the opposition. But I want to reiterate that what we are doing right now is to go out to consultation on the proposed draft plan that has been put forward by the Black Country authorities. The consultation exercise will be widespread, and we'll be trying to make sure that it reaches every area of the community, those that are affected possibly by allocated sites, and also those that are not too. We need to be able to do more work on this plan in the coming months. We need to look at things like densities in areas that we are proposing to develop within the urban area to maximise what we can get out of the urban area. And we also need to review some of the things that have been put forward with regards to infrastructure, which we've already made our concerns very clear. So that is going out for further reports to be able to find out exactly how the infrastructure would work on some of these proposed sites, as there are certainly some concerns from this side of the authority as to of the chamber as to those infrastructure requirements. I'll welcome any questions and refer anything to the officers as and when needed.
Comments, questions for anybody? Sorry, Councillor Baton.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harley. Just a couple of questions, well, one question and a plea from myself, really. So, first of all, I mean, I accept that this is giving permission to go out to consultation. So I accept that this is the first iteration, if you like, of this particular report. But I just want to confirm that the Cabinet and the Leader are actually quite happy with this current iteration as it is at this moment in time. And my second point is for Councillor Buttery around school provision, and it really is a plea from me at this point in time to make sure that that is first and foremost a serious consideration, and that's reflected on the issues we've got on Russell's Hall at the moment, where we have the new development of 145 homes and no additional school places. That is causing serious problems for some of our parents. So it is absolutely critical that you keep that first and foremost in your minds.
Does anybody want to respond first to Cathy before we go to anyone else? Can do, yeah.
Yeah, carry on.
I'm not saying anything.
Will they hear you on YouTube then?
Probably not.
So thank you, Councillor Baton. Absolutely. We do place planning every year, as you're fully aware. We've got a really good team that look at the places we need currently, but also trying to future-proof. So obviously all this will be weaved into it. You can do so much theoretically until obviously it's fully consulted and till the plan fully goes through. You can't sort of put shovels in the ground or put in extra classrooms or anything like that until it's absolutely certain. but I can assure you, in fact, I emailed the team this afternoon around a place planning issue. So we are absolutely looking at all the school provision because some schools actually have had reduced numbers this year, and we've had to reduce PAN in some schools that some of your colleagues will be aware of. We've had to reduce PAN in some areas, but equally we don't want to close those schools because we want to make sure we've got provision in the future. So I can assure you it's all part of that. Is that okay?
Okay.
Right then, I'll start with the response to the rest of the questions. Yeah. So, with regards to whether we're happy to be presenting this report or for Helen to be bringing the report to us to approve, there are various parts of this plan that we can be very, very pleased to be able to look at and present. And that is doing what we can to address climate change within the Black Country Plan, regenerating our town centres with significant new investment that we're delivering in the rest of this portfolio, but also across all parts of the council, and backing up that ambition with the plans required to be able to meet that. Being able to provide affordable housing in the various parts of the borough, depending on the relevant value areas, as we've been through with that new policy that's being proposed. So there are lots and lots of things that I think most people will look at this plan and be very, very happy to see, and I welcome the comments on those areas. Naturally, the one thing that most people are going to be looking at, and most people are going to be responding to the consultation, is about allocations in the Greenbelt. And I imagine that's the point to the question that you were trying to make. There is nobody that is elected that will be wanting to look at areas of our Greenbelt and say, well, we should release that for housing. Certainly not me. I'll let the leader speak for himself later. Now, what we have to do at this point is be responsible and acknowledge the report that has been put in front of us, in the sense that this report has been prepared along government planning guidelines to suggest where we can meet the housing figures that has been put upon us through the standard methodology. I'm sure we'll discuss those figures later. As we consider that, we also then need to think about the professional reports that have been commissioned and reported on that sit behind this plan, reports that will be available at consultation stage, reports that have already been produced and some are already in the public domain, which talk about the value and the harm that might be caused to the Greenbelt if certain sites are released. Now, what are in these plans are proposals that have been put forward by the planning officers and by the people that believe that this plan is what is possible to get through an examination in public. Now, just to briefly explain that to anyone watching at home, it is not actually Dudley Council or Dudley councillors that decide whether this plan is robust or indeed legal. It is a planning inspector, based in Bristol, no doubt, who will be holding an examination in public to determine if we have produced this plan in a legally sound way. At that examination in public, we must put forward the best possible defence of all of our Greenbelt sites, all of our green spaces that we want to protect for future generations. And those Greenbelt sites that are in this plan at this time by no means might be in this plan come the next stage, including possibly some of the sites that Cathy might have been referring to. Because by going out to consultation and by reviewing all of the evidence, we give the best possible chance to put together the strongest possible case to put forward to the examination in public when we come to that. And what's really important, I think, today is to make sure that everybody who is watching the meeting and everybody who hears about the meeting and is responding to this plan understands fully that the process needs this step in order to ensure when we go to the examination in public, we have the strongest possible case to put forward. It's a very long-winded answer, but I think I was going to cover all of that later on anyway, so I thought I'd get it out straight away. But I think that that will answer many of the points that might be arisen as to whether or not councillors that are on this side of the chamber are pleased to be seeing some of these allocated sites. And I know the leader will sum up later as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. Councillor Zada and then Councillor Ridley.
Right, thank you. I've got a couple of questions, so bear with me. Firstly, did I hear correctly that despite the consultation at the end of the consultation, there will be no substantial changes. Did I hear that? I think that was in your presentation.
I'm sorry, no substantial
You
changes.
said that provided that there was no substantial changes.
Oh, in terms of the recommendation, yeah. The actual wording is, if you can bear with me, is when we go out to consultation, then obviously we will then, if there's things like typos, that's what it really refers to. It's not a substantial change to anything in the actual document. So it actually says, sorry, just bear with me, to make any non-substantive changes considered necessary to the document prior to it being published and to agree the arrangements of consultation. That really means if we discover any typos or errors, we can correct them without having to come back to Cabinet. It doesn't mean any substantive changes in allocations or policies.
Okay.
It's minor typos and housekeeping.
So just for absolute clarity, there is still the opportunity for substantial changes to sites allocated or identified for allocation. Is that still an option at the end of the consultation?
Well, we have to see the responses to the consultation, but at the end of the day, the proposals that will go forward will have to demonstrate that they are deliverable and they are available. So if through the consultation something comes to light that changes the evidence that we have based this plan on, then we would have to consider before we publish.
I guess the point that I'm making is that this is going out to the public who are not legal experts, who don't have the ability to produce the amount of evidence that you will accept. And therefore, it looks to me like no matter what the public says, unless they produce evidence that can stand up to some form of legal scrutiny, it will not mean any changes to this document.
I'll just quickly take that one if that's okay, Helen. Sorry to cut you off. So once the draft plan has been out to consultation and the consultation has been received, further reports will be provided, and then we will be reviewing this plan again next year, and we will decide what is in the allocations come to the next stage when it goes back out to consultation again. On the point with regards to what impact members of the community can make on this process, as you'll know, I'm a Hales Owen member, and in Hales Owen there has been a significant public campaign with regards to the issues and options consultation, which I remember causing quite a few issues for my friends on the left here during the initial consultation phase. And when they got involved, there was public meetings, there was the ability for people to collaborate, there was extensive reports compiled by members of the public and put forward. Now, I think those documents hold as much weight as the documents that are produced by the planners, and ultimately, as the people that will propose whatever goes forward to the examination in public, we will put forward the strongest possible case, and we will ensure that the views of the public are respected in that right as best as possible way, so that they can be fruitful come the actual examination.
Okay, thank you for that. Just to ask the same question again then. The reason I'm asking this question is at the last sort of discussions that we were doing prior to the election around this, and I believe the planning department sent out some indicative areas. They were adamant about the type of evidence that would need to be provided to enable it to even be considered in any form of objection or put forward. Are you now saying that that has now changed and you will accept you would accept a contribution from members of the public without evidence to the skill set that you as planners and legal experts naturally have?
What I'm saying,
no, okay, yeah.
What I'm saying is that throughout the consultation phase, people will be able to have their say. Now, ultimately, it's for the people on my left to put together the plan documents. It is for us to look at that consultation and put forward what we feel is the right thing for the people of Dudley and for the plan document of Dudley. Now, when we turn around and decide that there are places that need to have further review, they will be reviewed. And that is exactly what's being done right now throughout the draft plan consultation. With regards to the legal weight of the representations, I'll let Helen and Carl possibly come back in. But what I've proved is that members of the public can make those representations and they can be taken into account.
No, I don't have any objection against that. What I'm saying is I'm dealing with the technicality of will the department that's accepting feedback from the consultation accept feedback without evidence? Because they haven't in the past.
I think what I would say is let's give the people of this borough a little bit more credit.
No, I have.
That they're quite capable of submitting evidence to this consultation process.
But
let's give the people of Dudley a bit more credit.
But they haven't been
Councillor Zada.
accepted. They haven't been accepted. And the point that I'm making is, will the department now accept it? It's quite a simple question.
I think you've already had your answer, Councillor.
Well, I haven't. Will they
give the
accept
people
it?
of Dudley a bit more credit, will you
I'm
please?
trying to.
Helen?
Thank you. To answer your question, all representations will be taken into account. The process requires us to document every response we've had and to provide, in effect, a response to it. Some of those responses will be much more technical than others because they will be submitted by developers. And from the planning officer's point of view, we're not only trying to evidence and defend proposed allocations, we're also trying to evidence and defend allocations that we have not made as well through the plan process. So there will be representations on both sides of that argument. We will have to respond to all of them. Some of them will be technical, some of them won't be. Our response will need to be technical and our response will need to evidence why we've made recommendations one way or another. The one thing I would say is community groups do have access to things like planning aid potentially. So if there are community groups that have an interest but don't feel that they have the skills to be able to respond, then there are a number of organisations that can support them in doing that. Thank you.
So that's fine. I'll carry on to my next question. I'll just keep a very close eye on what the department responds back when people put submissions in. The other question then is, does this now offer of the Greenbelt mean that the gap between the need and supply is dealt with? So to make it simple, you're giving up all of this Greenbelt. Have you answered the exam question?
You can start on that one.
Thank you. The short answer is we still have a shortfall after all that. So by the time we've done everything we can in the urban land, plus we've looked at other sites such as Greenbelt allocations, and we've looked at our duty to cooperate, there is still a shortfall. But to be able to have a duty to cooperate with our neighbours, we have to show that we, as a Black Country, have done everything we can to max out our urban land capacity and any other land that we could put forward. Then we go to our neighbours. Even after all of that, we still have a shortfall.
And just supplementary on that then, does this naturally mean that those areas that, let's use Gornal for an example, where they are obviously occupy large parts of land that don't belong to this authority but will have an impact on Dudley, will then mean that they're put in a position where they may end up having to impact Dudley by passing on the duty to cooperate? Is that likely impact?
Sorry, just unclear your question. Are you talking about land that's just outside the borough but
What
might be
I'm
under
trying
pressure?
to say is, we've talked about what will happen in our own land and the impact, which we've talked both on structural, GPs, schools, etc. There'll be neighbouring lands which, if they are obviously building on, will have impact on Dudley. How are we dealing with that?
Okay, so if it's a neighbouring authority that's bringing forward an adjacent site in the Greenbelt or not, we still have conversations through that duty to cooperate and they still have to meet the infrastructure needs. So in that respect, they don't, you don't recognise a borough boundary if you've got a GP, do you? So we do have to have those conversations and we'll talk across boundaries. But obviously we're relying on those authorities to provide that infrastructure if it's within their borough. But yeah, we have that conversation.
Okay.
And
then the final one,
I'm saying they have a duty to come to us and say, we will be thinking about making those developments, and therefore we then have to start looking at infrastructure to turn around and say, actually, that's not feasible, or otherwise.
We will be consulted on their plans and we will comment on their plans, and if we think they don't provide sufficient infrastructure, that will be the response, potentially.
And the other, there's, if I understand this correctly, there's obviously, because we had a pass down from Birmingham, didn't we? When they did this, it was a significant number of, it went down to the Black Country for a duty to cooperate. We haven't been able to fulfil that. Presumably, that will be the same for, there's no obligation on anybody to accept a duty to cooperate.
No, it's a duty to cooperate, not an obligation to provide housing numbers. So you're right to reference Birmingham. When they were doing their plan, we undertook to see if it was feasible to take maybe up to 3,000 homes. We haven't been able to, as the figures that we've been through tonight will demonstrate. But they do obviously have to go through a local planning examination, and they have to, we have to show that we have cooperated and would sought cooperation from our neighbours. But it has to time with the plans, and we have to have the evidence to justify their ask or the ask of us at that same time.
So are the consequences, and this is the final point for now, are the consequences of that then that more Greenbelt land in Dudley will be given up?
I'll answer that one. So this draft plan has gone on the basis of what the planners feel they are able to defend at an examination in public at this stage. There's still more reports to come, there's still more evidence to gather. Now, if that is what we're able to defend at this stage, then I believe that that is the maximum that we could possibly be going to examination in public looking to release. Now, again, there's plenty of water to go under the bridge on that point, but when it comes down to it, the borough has refused the duty to cooperate from Birmingham. Birmingham could go to our examination in public and say we were wrong to. I don't know what grounds they'd be able to do that, because if they did, they'd have to somehow prove that we were somehow miraculously meeting this housing need that we've got in the borough, and as we can see tonight, we already aren't. Now, if you look at another area of the country, I think it's Buckinghamshire. Buckinghamshire took the approach that they would not take a duty to cooperate, but Milton Keynes Council, was it Milton Keynes? It was one of them, turned round and put an examination in public, appeal in, sort of thing, and turned around and said, actually, they haven't done enough, and Buckinghamshire were told to go away and to look at their local plan again. So we have to be able to defend that point, which we perfectly can with Birmingham. When it comes to our duty to cooperate with other areas, because we're operating as a black country, we've got neighbours, say Staffordshire, all the way through up towards Lichfield, and there are positive discussions with those at the moment.
So the consequences are yes, you might give up more Greenbelt.
That was a very long way of me saying no.
Okay, so no, we'll accept that then.
And to Nick to say we very much want to see infrastructure with some of these housing projects. Certainly in the north, you are well aware that we do need another secondary school, and the time is coming where it's going to get quite acute. If there are more houses going in Sedgley, that puts pressure on the schools there. But the other two, I just want clarification on a couple of points. It says here, one new site for employment land in Bean Road, Cosley. I'm taking that is, and this is only because only this afternoon I found the old plans for the Bean site in Cosley, when all of the site was due to be housing. It now says it's going to be employment land. I take it that is, as we understand it, the area that was to house the supermarket and a community centre. I just want clarification, so when my residents ask, what's this employment land, it's that side of the site, is that correct?
Yeah, so it's the site that has historically been looked at for a supermarket and all residential, but some of it is now staying employment, and that has happened on a number of the employment sites that we thought under the original core strategy would go to housing and now actually staying as employment, or part staying as employment.
But the other side, it's now been reduced to 500 houses on the other side of the site. Is that correct? Or it's about that. No, it's about halved, isn't it? Yeah. And my other point, and I'm sorry to raise this, leader, but I've got to say this. There is a little dot on the map here in Cosley that says this is existing housing land to be moved to the new plan. I take it that's the site in Central Drive, Budden Road, that you've put the temporary travellers site on, that it will go back to its original use as housing land.
Let's see what the consultation process brings up. I wouldn't want to predetermine anything, Councillor Ridley. We'll keep an open mind at this point.
Okay, all right, thank you.
He says with a big wink. Sorry, Judy. Anybody else?
Thank you, Councillor Harley. So, first of all, I'd make the same appeal as my colleagues, councillors Ridney and Bayton, about the pressure on the infrastructure, but this time in connection with health facilities. I know that the council doesn't have direct provision, isn't responsible for direct provision of those, but as in terms of any discussions they have about improving and making sure that there's sufficient facilities for an increasing population, which there is already through a development that's now occurring now, can some attention also be paid to health facilities too, and making sure that we work with the health authorities on that. The main question I have relates to process. And this may be something to do with the wording under the recommendations that makes it a little bit unclear for me, so bear with me and help me clarify this. So, the first recommendation, approving the draft Black Country Plan documents, are we saying, or are you saying, to approve them as they are now in Appendix 1, because there are still errors and ambiguities and typos in that document as it exists now on the website? So are we saying that that's actually got to change before the consultation starts?
We've covered that question already.
Yes, but I just want to clarify, because it says
just
it's
to re-answer your question, that has been sorted. There will be non-substantive changes made to the document before it goes out to full consultation.
So, in that case, when you say non-substantive, we are also talking about making clear exactly where sites are that are being put forward. Because I'd raised about an ambiguity connected to a site in my ward, but the plan has not been reflected to update that. So people going on the website now and seeing the documents, because these documents are they're for public scrutiny now. The formal consultation might start in August, but they're out. You know, the documents are out there on the website and contain some errors, some typos, and some ambiguities. So, you know, how long is it going to take for those to be amended? Is it that they're just not going? We're just going to wait until August before we've got a clean document to go to the public with, because it's out there with the public now.
So there's been a number of amendments so far, just to clarify issues. We've got to remember this is a very, very large document, which is being inputted to by 4 different authorities, with various authorities chipping in, making changes, which can then lead to some errors. There's already been a confirmation that there's been an update towards where the high and medium value areas are on the maps that we've had. If we can find out exactly what site you're not clear about, we'll ensure that whatever happens in the final report, you've already got it. There you go.
It's been confirmed today, but the plan hasn't been updated, and there'll still be people out there who won't be clear exactly what's being put out for consultation.
Carl?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Foster. Yeah, as well as that site that you've mentioned, we are producing a technical document, each of the 4 authorities, well, collectively, and an appendix for each authority, which outlines the details of every site that's in there. So far, what you've seen is generally site known as titles rather than full addresses. We appreciate that's not always helpful. The technical document will have a site known as, full address, reference number, plans, so everything will be perfectly clear. That is will be available all the time the consultation starts. As Councillor Phipps said, I appreciate you'd like that now. Unfortunately, it's a huge document. I think there'll be 1,000 pages in that document, and we're trying to make sure that it's absolutely spot on, because, as was mentioned earlier, that will be the document which both the public and developers and landowners will rely upon to understand our rationale for our decisions, and will challenge those decisions accordingly. So we want to make sure we do that properly. I notice there are some documents out there where it's not as good as we'd like it to be, but that's, again, due to the size. We will make sure they're all correct.
Well, and obviously, you have to understand that councillors are getting questions now raised with them by the public, because these documents are out there in the public domain for all to see. My second question relates to the scrutiny committee. Now, that scrutiny committee, which the documents will be going to, is on Thursday, the 15th of July. What will the terms of reference be for that scrutiny committee? What is that part of the consultation that it's going through scrutiny? What's the expectation that scrutiny committee will be doing and delivering as part of the exercise before it goes to formal public consultation in August?
Thank you. As officers, we propose that we put a recommendation that goes to scrutiny for two reasons. One, because we need to plan for that if it was a likelihood for Cabinet. We also think this is an open and transparent process and we want it to have full scrutiny. So it's for officers to be able to provide more detailed information potentially to members on some of the finer detail that are set in the plan of some of those allocations and some of those new policies and strategic direction.
Okay, so the recommendations that are made from that, might they be used to amend the document before it goes out to public consultation, or it just forms part of the consultation that you're going to get from August, you know, as part of that?
I think, without trying to dodge the question, it kind of depends what comes out of that scrutiny process and whether we can take it into account. If it is meaningful to do so at this point and relevant to do so, then possibly. Otherwise, it will form part of that consultation process and will be considered with the wider responses.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Khurshed Ahmed.
Thank you, Leader. I just need a clarification on the duty to cooperate. It's easy to turn around, for example, when Birmingham wanted us to cooperate and provide the necessary homes. We were not able to, and we could justify the reasons for it. However, in the cases, for example, when our neighbours, South Staffordshire, for example, come with a proposal near to the boundary line, they do say, yes, we will cooperate and we will provide X amount of housing, but then fail or are unable to justify that they can provide the infrastructure in respect of the schooling or GPs or health provisions. In those circumstances, what is the legal duty in order to tackle that issue? Because they will say, yes, we can give the housing, but it's the infrastructure side. If they fail to provide, how will we tackle that particular point?
So when they go out to consultation on their plan, that consultation involves neighbouring authorities. So we have an opportunity at that point to interrogate their evidence and their submission and to comment if we think the infrastructure is inappropriate. We can also appear at an examination in public if we think it's necessary to do so to respond. But part of that, getting a sound plan is not just allocating sufficient sites to meet your housing need, it's also demonstrating deliverability, and therefore you need to be able to show that you've got the infrastructure to support that growth. So that it would be both aspects.
Just more. I think it was. Thank you for clarifying that point. It's useful because I was just worried, just in case they're able to, or we can't justify, or they can't justify the infrastructure, and then there was potentially more risk of going into more Greenbelt land. But thank you for clarifying that. Cheers.
Okay, thank you, Khurshed. Councillor Peatlow.
Cheers, Leader, and cheers, Helen, and cheers, Simon, for the comprehensive responses and the introduction. Just a couple of questions, really, for me. The first one is leading on from Simon's really clear position on the 3% Greenbelt, and that it will certainly not be more than 3%. I just wanted to check with that, whether that was very clearly the officer's view as well.
So the 3% of Greenbelt is based on the evidence that we have had so far and the very comprehensive assessment of the Greenbelt, which has assessed which Greenbelt is of most sufficient need to retain as Greenbelt. So we've assessed it in terms of meeting the 5 reasons for having Greenbelt, and we look at all the sensitivities of that area and how sustainable that location is. So a number of sites have been disregarded because they are either of very high value in Greenbelt tests, or they're not sustainable enough in terms of accessibility. So we have put forward to officers proposed allocations that we think we can either defend an inquiry, or we could not defend not putting them in the face of the substantial housing need that we're trying to address. So on the flip side of that, and I guess the question that most members are trying to sort of really get to, is the position when we end up at an inquiry with a shortfall, and would we be in a position to allocate more? We're happy at an officer level that we have got the evidence that suggests that we have put forward the sites that are appropriate and defendable to be in, and defendable to not be in. That does not stop an inspector reaching a different view, but we will be going to that examination with the evidence that we have and defending what we have allocated and what we haven't allocated. So at this point in time, these are the proposed allocations. We're not proposing to put further sites forward. We're proposing to defend our strategy on the basis of the evidence that we have that says this is the maximum we should be allocating. An inspector may reach a different conclusion.
Okay, so that's not necessarily a yes or a no.
I haven't gone out to consultation yet, but it's a yes for the draft plan. That's the only allocations that we're proposing.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, it's the blurring of the officer and political responses, isn't it? Can I then just explore some of the issues, and this is very much in a layperson's terms, and I think this leads into the consultation that we'll be going on to, and it's leading on from Kershid's points around neighbouring authorities. Because, of course, many people who know Dudley will know that as we get to the boundaries of Dudley, they touch areas where, for our neighbouring partners, may well be, if there's any pressure with regard to green space or Greenbelt, that they could be relatively attractive because they are out of the way of large residential areas within. I'm thinking, if you look around the Pedmore Norton up to Halsowen areas or anything. What reassurances have we got that we will be fully involved in that, and what reassurances can we give to those people within those wards at the moment that aren't impacted directly through this plan, that they won't be impacted from their neighbours' plans?
Okay, so we don't necessarily know allocations that neighbouring plans may make. It depends what stage they're at their local plan process. But similar to the response about the infrastructure, we are consulted on those plans. We are in discussions through duty to cooperate. So we will obviously be involved as they start to come forward, and we'll respond at an officer level and through obviously member agreement appropriately at that time. Now, just because you live in Dudley Borough doesn't mean you can't comment on somebody else's plan, and therefore we would encourage members of the public to respond on their consultation processes as well and raise any issues they think are pertinent to them.
That's really helpful, Helen. And just one follow-up point really to that lead. I'm just wondering whether we could maybe look at that so that we can keep an eye on what neighbouring authorities are doing also, so that maybe we can look towards how we can engage in that process for people who may or may not be impacted within those wards. Because quite often, for example, if you live in a certain part of the borough, the neighbouring authority may, their HQ could be several miles away from where the potential is. So if we can look at a way to maybe monitor that and then look to a way to engage, that would be most helpful. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, are there any other members of the opposition? Councillor Ali?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Firstly, I appreciate we need more housing, obviously, to meet the growing demand, and it's really important that we provide that to our residents. And the importance of green belt, green spaces, has never been kind of highlighted to such an extent since over the last 17 months now during COVID, how important our green spaces are to people. And in terms of our residents, I mean, they have made their position clear in terms of green spaces and green belts that they want to protect. Now, what we have here, if I may say, is a Tory government. We have a Tory mayor, we have Tory MPs and a Tory council. And what seems to come along this chain, no one seems to know how to protect our green spaces and green belt. Now, the Tory mayor comes out with, he's now launched a review. I mean, where has he been the last 3-4 years? Why wasn't any work done on that? Now, one of the MPs representing this side of the area doesn't even live in the area, and he says, I cannot accept that we have a situation in which the local council proposes to release these elements of Greenbelt, and the quotation goes on. And you know, and he's kind of now blaming the council. So there seems to be this kind of blame game going on, and you yourself said give credit to the people of Dudley, and that's what we want to do. We on this side are clear on our position. We want to give the people of this borough the credit they due, and they have made their views already quite clear on where we stand with this. And in terms of the infrastructure, the question has been asked, and Councillor Buttery also said about school places. But why I haven't heard about the consequences and implications, the financial implications and consequences as well. I mean, we should have those clarified as well. What does this really mean to us, to the council, and to the taxpayer? Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you again, Charlie. I'll pick up that point first. I'm really pleased that you are making Labour's position clear on this. And I'm really pleased that you're worried about the consequences of what might happen if every site in this proposal is carried forward in 2-3 years' time. But I wish you'd have made your position clear and been concerned in 2016 when the preparation of the Black Country Plan commenced, as it says on page 2. Because, forgive me if I'm wrong, but weren't you in control of this council in 2016? So let's have less of the crocodile tears and the fake, shallow concern. You had a long time in control of this authority to take us out of the Black Country Plan. And I can say, as leader of this authority, and I think I'll have the full backing of my cabinet member for region, I don't think we'll ever enter into this arrangement again. But it's a pity that when you had the decision to take, you didn't take it. Simon, do you want to add?
Couple of points. Firstly, building on what you've just said there, Patrick. When we look back a few years ago to 2016 issues and options consultation, I don't know if anyone would have been in the room at the time, but there was an overview and scrutiny committee where we tested to the point of breaking point the term objectively assessed need. Now, back then, objectively assessed need is what we used to calculate how our housing figures were created. And at that point, it caused a major concern for members. And as an opposition, we were making that concern very, very clear. And since becoming the administration, we have been doing absolutely everything it takes to explore and utilise every last brownfield site in the borough. Now, actually, if you look at this plan, there are only 5 brownfield sites in the entire borough that we haven't been able to bring forward for housing, due to various things, because they might be sites of important natural conservation, they might not have any kind of transport access. I think a couple of them are in an enterprise zone and are already the site of a very successful business. Now, considering there are only 5 brownfield sites in the entire borough that we can't put into this plan, to then start to turn around and say that we're possibly not making the most of the brownfield sites is completely wrong. However, one thing we can do, which is what we're working with Andy Street to do, the mayor, by the way, that has single-handedly won the most investment that this region has ever seen into brownfield remediation, getting ridiculous amounts of houses built on sites that would not have been viable otherwise, and it's him that's been winning that investment from the government, not anybody from the opposition party, certainly. Given he has launched that review, he will be contributing to what we're doing in making sure that all of the sites that we've identified and any that might not currently be viable will be viable to contribute towards that total. Now, as we've seen, the figures still suggest that, what was it, after duty to cooperate, there might be 20,000 homes shortage. Now, it's certainly my opinion that the way that those figures are now calculated, which is a standard calculation, needs to be looked at. And we need to take into account some of the things that have happened with regards to certainly COVID this year, but also Brexit not too long ago. And we need to be thinking with the government and with our representatives like Andy Street, how actually does this apply in 2021 and certainly 2024 when we adopt this plan? And those are the conversations that we'll be having to make sure that this plan will be the right one for Dudley and it protects the sites that deserve to be protected.
Okay, we've had 7 members of the opposition comment. There are only 8 of you here. Anybody want to come back in? Councillor Lazada.
Hello? Hello? Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay. Just a couple of points, really. I wasn't going to come back to this, but I think Shokat's made a very good point, and I was actually not very happy at the response about that. I'll make a couple of points on this one. Firstly, it was me that wrote to the Mayor, Andy Street, asking him to direct some of that brownfield rectification money to Dudley, because actually none of it was coming to Dudley, and I'll be interested to know how much of it has actually come to Dudley from the amount that's been awarded by the government. And I'll, you know, if it has come...
It's a direct question back.
Yeah.
You tell me the site in Dudley that's not being remediated.
Let me finish, and then you'll have an opportunity to speak. I didn't speak over you, did I? So I'll be interested to know how much more money has come around from Dudley, to Dudley from the Mayor. If there is any sites or there isn't any sites, I'm not really that interested. That's your job as the administration. What I think that is the case, and the reason we're in this position, it's not just about brownfield site, building out on brownfield, it's about town centre planning and having more accommodation in this borough. And whatever happened in 2016, 1952 or 1948 or every other year is irrelevant. Let me just be clear about the position of the Labour group. We don't believe in building on any green belt, green space or anything remotely green. And we will do everything that we possibly can to encourage our residents to be vocal. And that's why at the start of this discussion, I was being absolutely clear that those representations will be accepted by the department coordinating the consultation, because that's where they were blocked before. So what if your administration is about protecting the green belt, protecting green space, let's work on that then. Let's make sure we protect this green space and green belt. You've told us it's 3% and it won't be any more than that. What happened 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, we can write in the history books, and we'll happily collect some articles for you to put in there. But today, where we are here and now, our green belt in Dudley is at risk, and we're here to protect it.
Well, I can't comment on 20, 30, 40 years ago, because 30, 40 years ago I wasn't here, so I'll have to rely on you for that. But certainly with regards to the brownfield remediation, I'd like to know, for the basis of your question, what brownfield site in Dudley are you suggesting that we haven't had the remediation for? And we will go away and we'll find that.
So the way this works is we ask the questions and you answer it. And that's what we've done.
So this isn't a two-way street then. So there's no chance of you being able to substantiate the things that you're roundly alleging. So let's just have a look at Dudley Labour Group's press release with regards to this particular issue. So as we go through, we see various elements of what you need to do to place your fingers in your ears and not face up to the reality of the situation that we're in. In here, we've got people are actually criticising this authority for doing what we legally have to do to go to neighbouring boroughs and ask for them to consider the overall housing need that we cannot facilitate in this borough. Now, if we didn't actually go and do the duty to cooperate, which is what this press release in your name suggests, what will then happen is we have an even bigger shortfall when we go to examination in public, and the developers that have proposed some of the sites that we are intent to protect will have even more of an argument to be able to throw those out. So, actually, rather than this being a one-way street, you ask the questions, we answer, I think that we also need to have a very honest discussion about the realities of this process, the way that the legalities will work when we get to examination in public, and not play politics with it. We can get everybody involved in the community and their voices can be heard, but only if we start to set aside this ridiculous...
If you're about protecting the green belt, there's no policy, there's no politics here. We're in for the green belt and the green space. If you are, there's no politics. End of.
Okay, thank you, Simon. I think that was a very robust response. Well done. Councillor Cathy Baton.
Thanks, Leader. Just sort of focusing a little bit now onto the law. Well, I don't know how many we have on the council house waiting list, but I know from my constituents we are really struggling to get families rehoused at the moment. There seems to be a distinct lack of adequate family housing across the borough. And when we look at the Black Country plan and the definition of affordable housing, which is 20% below market value sale, as I understand it, do we have assurances that this plan is actually going to go some way to assisting people on our council waiting list to move into the homes and the adequate homes that they actually deserve? Because, as I say, at the moment, I'm really struggling to get residents of mine rehoused into satisfactory, safe family accommodation.
Okay, who wants to answer that?
Do you want to start on that one?
Yep.
Thank you.
Affordable.
Obviously, the plan is based on housing numbers, but within that numbers, there is obviously, we have to reflect need, and that comes in terms of house size and house tenure. We work very closely with our colleagues in housing on some of that evidence base. All we can do is provide a policy that requires, subject to viability, that element of provision is provided for, but it remains a very strong policy base. As Councillor Phipps has mentioned, we are looking and factoring in viability at the beginning so that we hopefully maximise the potential to deliver affordable housing, but it is based on housing needs, and we obviously work closely with colleagues in the housing directorate.
And just to build on that one, there is it the strategic housing market assessment? The latest one that's come out that details exactly what type of housing needs to be going where. There's a report that's been released that kind of feeds into this document that details pretty much to the number how many affordable homes and how many types of affordable homes we will need, what sizes they will be. But certainly you're absolutely right, which is why we've got, I would say, a fairly ambitious house building programme within the council to build new council homes, but also to be able to build homes for private sale on lands that's coming up around the borough, which alternatively probably private developers wouldn't even look at, and we're the ones that's fulfilling them. Sorry, it's bad, isn't it?
No. But I mean, thank you for the response, but I'm still really concerned that when we talk about affordable housing, which, as I go back and say, I mean, the land in Kings Winford, for example, which will be high value, so 20% less of high value, which I'm guessing is going to be what, around 300, 400,000, is that classed as high value? 20% less than that is not going to be affordable for many people, certainly not to get family, people on the rung of the ladder. So I just want, I'm not expecting necessarily a definitive answer, but I am flagging that up as an area of concern, that I don't believe that this plan goes far enough to be able, and I do understand that you're driven by government policy around affordable housing, but I don't believe that that goes far enough or deep enough to addressing the need that we have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kath. We've got Pete Lowe and then Adam Aston.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. It's just really, again, hopefully just a brief one, just so I'm consistent when we go out. I've heard Simon's very robust challenge to the Labour group with regard to building on our position, not building on Greenbelt. Just want to make sure you can give the same robust response to Suzanne Webb, the Conservative Member of Parliament for Staybridge, who has said it's essential to protect all Greenbelt area within the borough of Dudley. If you can maybe give a robust attack on Suzanne, and then I'll move on to Marco Lungi shortly. So I'll stop and pause there in an artistic manner.
Well, Suzanne, I'm sure, will be absolutely delighted to see that we're protecting Corbett Meadow by giving that a green spells designation, which not just shows our commitment towards green belt, but also green spaces across the entirety of the urban area, not just those on the edges, but also those within. And as we've already discussed today, these sites, the ones that are in the allocation, are what has been put forward by the planners and the documents that have been created in order to put, evidence the Black Country Plan on the basis of what can legally be defended under the current planning laws.
Thank you very much, Simon. Not quite as aggressive towards Suzanne as I noticed to the Leader. I'll move on to Marco Lungi, who quoted, and I think we're relatively consistent with the line that both Councillor Ali And in fact, we seem to have far more in common with the Conservative members of Parliament than we appear to have with colleagues. But he states, I'll build up to it just so he can build that blood pressure up to give a fairly robust response back, because he's quite damning, isn't he? He actually states, I've been very clear that I strongly object, actually stronger words than both Councillor Ali and the Labour leader said. He strongly objects to any development on any Greenbelt land. And guess who the Conservative Member of Parliament holds to account for that? Dudley Council. Do you want to maybe give a robust response to, just so we can take those messages out, maybe in the same way that you consistently did to our colleagues earlier? Thank you very much.
Yeah. So what we're doing as the administration, the ones that are actually responsible for being able to deliver a legal plan, not somebody who can sit on the other side of this room and not somebody who can sit there and they can oppose everything that's put forward to them, because let's face it, they're going to be in opposition for a long time, certainly longer than it takes to adopt this plan. We are going to be able to hold those discussions, quite frank discussions with their MPs, because it's not just us that will be going to the government to ensure that Dudley's voices are heard in this planning system. It needs to be our members of Parliament and our West Midlands Mayor Andy Street as well. Those discussions have already started.
Thank you very much. I forgot Andy Street. No, so thank you very much for that opportunity. In fact, I think we know the views of Andy Street on this the matter, don't we? But let's just finish with Boris Johnson, because Boris Johnson, I think 2 hours before we came in today, made the statement that there should be no building on Greenbelt. So in the same way that and I think the reason I'm raising it in this way, you seem to be extremely critical when the leader of the Labour group says exactly what your own Member of Parliament in Stourbridge is saying, the Member of Parliament in Dudley is saying, the Mayor of the West Midlands is saying, and indeed the Prime Minister of this country is saying. Is it because those four happen to be Conservatives, one happens to be Labour, yet a consistent theme of all of them is let's not build on Greenbelt and green space land? Which one is different? What is the leader of the Labour group saying that is fundamentally so offensive that you respond in that way, yet you give politicians responses to every one of your brothers and sisters in the Conservative Party?
So my comrades in the Conservative Party, as Pete might like to say, they will be having conversations directly with us, with me, with Patrick, and we'll be putting Dudley's position very, very clear. Now, the difference between those people and between Councillor Zada and every councillor sat over that side, and indeed this side, is that we're the ones that have to vote on this plan. Now, if we sit here and we do exactly what Councillor Zada is saying, no development on the Greenbelt, not at all, never in a million years. Well, actually, if we did that, we would not legally be allowed to vote on this plan. We could have no more part in it. Then what use can we be to the people of Dudley? If we were to predetermine ourselves right now, purely for opposition's sake, rather than follow the legal process, make the representations, and do what is right for the people of Dudley to ensure that these green spaces can be protected, then we wouldn't even have a vote or say in the matter when it comes to it. We won't be predetermining ourselves. We will be following the process that's set out in law, because that's the best possible way to achieve what we want to achieve for the people of Dudley.
Okay, sorry, Leader, and this will be my final contribution, but I'm really trying to encourage Simon to answer a relatively direct question, I thought, with a relatively direct answer. But we are slowly getting there. So what we appear to have had through this slight exchange is it's acceptable for two members of Parliament, for the Prime Minister and indeed the Mayor of the West Midlands to advocate Dudley authority breaking the law or not doing what their duties. But when the Leader of the Opposition, what I heard the Leader of the Opposition say was what we should do is work together to try and rule out building upon green space and green open land. What we were met with then was a very robust response. It seems relatively inconsistent with the responses that you've given to a number of leading Conservative Party representatives who were simply saying the same thing.
Forgive me, I missed the point where we talked about working together, because that certainly wasn't coming across.
No.
Okay, I think we'll move on. I think you'll get a fuller answer from myself in a moment, Pete, when I summarise. Councillor Adam Aston.
Thanks, Leader. I've got two questions. One's very simply a point of clarification for Helen, really. Just with regards, the reference to the land off Udefield Crescent is identified as falling within the Sedgley ward. Can you just, I'm very aware this is on the ward boundary. Can you just confirm that the land identified does actually fall within Sedgley, it's not Upper Gordon ward setting?
Can we just double check, and I'll confirm in a second if you want to move on to the next question, please.
No problem. My question for less clarification is, across the country, 1.1 million homes granted planning permission since 2011 are yet to be built. The LGA is calling on councils to be given powers to charge developers full council tax on every unbuilt home from the point at which the original planning permission is expired. There is already land identified as being carried forward in the plan. So how can we ensure that brownfield sites and actually banked land are utilised for homes and not built on, and not leaving even more of a gap requiring Greenbelt release in the future?
I'll cover that one if that's okay. So I completely agree with the sentiments with regards to unfulfilled developments. Now, certainly, this is only a small scale, but in my ward, there's like 5 properties that have had planning permission forever, and I've been bending their ears because I'm sick and tired of it being an unused derelict space. I'm talking about green spaces too much tonight. There you go. An unused derelict space which could have 5 perfectly good homes on. Now, at the moment, we've got absolutely no real legal powers to do anything to compel them to fulfil that planning permission that they've been given. The LGA have put forward quite an interesting way of dealing with that. Certainly don't disagree with that in any way out of principle. So I'd be one of the people that would be making an argument that we need more ammunition to be able to ensure that people fulfil those developments. However, from a local plan point of view, regardless of whether those developments have been fulfilled or not yet, they are taken as units in the plan. So even if every single one is built on, single one is built on between now and 2024, when we adopt this plan, we still have the same figures because it goes on viability rather than completions, although there will be details about completions in these documents because that's the estimated completions that we would be expected to do. But of course, sometimes the reality is with those private developers, it's very different, and that needs to be tackled.
Okay, we had every one of the opposition... Sorry, Carl, forgive me.
To come back on that point? Yeah, the Viewfield Crescent site is solely within the Sedgley ward. The boundary, I probably can't tell, I apologise for that. The boundary for the Upper Gordon ward goes around the other 3 sides of it, so it just fits into that little bit there. It does look unusual, but that's just the way it falls. Thank you.
I'm sure it won't stop you delivering a leaflet on it.
Okay, all the opposition have spoken, some more than once. Has everybody exhausted their comments and questions? I'll take that as yes. Any comments from this side before I sum up? Once I sum up, it is my intention to go to the recommendations. Any comments? Okay, right, I'll sum up on what I think is the situation and where we are. I think the real issue here is the absurd manner that the formula for working out how many houses needed is worked out. Now, unless the government change that formula, then local councils will effectively, in my opinion, have no say on what, where or how many homes are built in the future. Therefore, members of the opposition, members of parliament, on whatever side, need to stop pontificating for a quick giveaway headline and start to be serious about helping us as a council, a united council, in protecting the Greenbelt. Now, if we throw out all sites now, then the planning inspectorate at Bristol could not only overrule our decision, but also add in Greenbelt sites already dismissed by our planning team. So to counter the silly claim in what was a really ridiculous press release by the Labour Party that when Dudley is full, it's full, We can't simply do that. We have a process to go through, and let's be clear, we can't delay this process, as some other people not in this room have said, for political reasons. Because if we can't defend that with the planning inspectorate, then we really are putting large swathes of the Greenbelt at greater risk than they already are. Therefore, we need a serious and well-informed argument to counter this ridiculous manner of forecasting future housing needs. Now, the critical thing to do as a council and as elected members is to prevent developers successfully challenging what will be this Cabinet's ultimate decision. And we've got to show that whilst members may have strong misgivings on all sides at this pre-consultation stage, that we are not prejudging the outcome of the forthcoming consultation. Now, we can indicate constituents' views, and I myself have been contacted by dozens of residents who are absolutely appalled and disgusted that any buildings could be contemplated by developers on our Greenbelt within Kings Wingford. But you will know from what I've just said that at this moment in time, although I could not support development within the Triangle or Hull Beach, however, before I, as leader, and the Cabinet make a final decision, it's important to understand the views of the public and for their opinions to be taken into account. And once the views of the public are gathered in that consultation process, myself as leader of the Council and the rest of the Cabinet will then be able to make a final decision. So, for my part, as part of this process, I really would like the following. I'd like local residents to write in and take a full part in the public consultation process and to vent how important the Greenbelt is and to give us reasons why sites should either be kept in or taken out. And it doesn't need to be a political football between two parties, and we don't need to be at loggerheads with members of Parliament, but the facts are this is a process that we have to go through and see through to the end. The second thing is I will be tasking Dudley MBC planners to review exactly what is proposed on every brownfield site. However, I already have one member of Parliament bemoaning the fact that we're planning to build on a brownfield site. Now, it's either brownfield or it's Greenbelt. Wake up. You can't have both. It's brownfield at every available brownfield site to meet our future housing need, or you risk building on the Greenbelt. So people need to wake up, smell the coffee, get round the table and have a grown-up discussion. So I want our planners to really review every aspect of brownfield that we have left to develop. And key points made from the opposition about on previous plans where we've allocated brownfield and it's yet to still be developed. Good, some valid points. And we need to look those developers in the eye and say why 5, 6 years later or 10 years later, as Simon's alluded to, have these sites not been developed rather than go to Greenbelt first because it's easier. And I welcome Andy Street's review into brownfield and where that money is being allocated and if it's being spent and if we've got value for money. I welcome that review because that overall will help Dudley as a council to do our best for our residents and for the protection of Greenbelt. And the third one, as mentioned, MPs need to start a serious conversation with the relevant ministers about changing this calculation formula. Now, for our part, we were asked what we're doing. The 4 Black Country leaders, with the Chief Exec and the relevant Cabinet member, will be meeting Chris Pincher in the next week or so to bring this issue to his attention. But we also need our local MPs to also be lobbying for the same. And I'll finish in a moment, guys, but I'll quote Chris Pincher's boss, Robert Jenrick, who said only this weekend on national television, "We won't be building on the Greenbelt." Well, ministers can make sure that that's easy enough for this council and any other council by simply stating that local authorities no longer have to review Greenbelt boundaries when there is a housing shortfall. That one line, I don't care how they do it, but that one line would stop us building on one single blade of Greenbelt land. Correct. And finally, as and when this part of the process is over, if, and I state if, sites are removed, then Dudley MBC needs to have a very sound and solid argument for doing so. Otherwise, the inspectorate may well reverse any decision or decisions that we take. Now, I think I've been fairly outspoken there. I've given the opposition a bash. I've given our own MPs a bash. What we really need to do is to get everybody working together, whether you're Conservative members, Labour members, members of Parliament or the general public. We all need together, because we may have our differences politically on different policies. I don't think there is a difference here. I think every 72 members of this council and all 5 borough MPs genuinely want to protect the Greenbelt, but there is a process to go through that we have to make sure we get it right, so we don't inadvertently threaten more Greenbelt. Now, I'm getting quite dry. Everyone's had the say tonight that wanted to, so I will now move on to those recommendations on page 1, section 2. There are 6 of them, and if you'll indulge me a little bit more, I think that the last one is quite important to me, about going to the future Council Scrutiny Committee. Now, I have no jurisdiction over that committee. I can't tell them what to scrutinise, what to do, but I would hope that they look at particularly 2 main options. That is, full use of the current brownfield sites in any future brownfield, and secondly, scrutinise those Greenbelt sites that have been put up within this plan. And that's all I'll say. So I will say to Cabinet, recommendation there on section 2, page 1, is it your authority that we accept those recommendations?
Yes, Leader.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your contributions. Much appreciated. Agenda item 4, to report on any issues arising from scrutiny committees. Okay. And nice to know they're all awake on the end there, after such a long meeting on one subject. And number 5, to consider any questions from members to the Leader where 2 clear as day notice has been given to the monitoring officer, reference Cabinet Procedure Rule 2.5. Okay, thank you, Manjid. Okay, that therefore concludes tonight's meeting. Can I thank everybody for the contributions, and thanks to the members of the public also for turning up too. Thank you. Good evening.